I'll introduce myself real quick, and then I'm going to share my screen. So, my name is Tom Roberto. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for a business called CoreTech. Um, my 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 career has always kind of revolved around technology at enterprise kind of settings and retail settings. And I spent a lot of time at a digital agency for a while, and that's kind of where I get like the marketing, UI, UX, user experience design type background. And it's really been around how to deploy technology and digital signage and marketing systems and advertising systems where you'd see them in like stores like McDonald's or Wendy's, Macy's, things like that. I've got a unique take on this kind of stuff, which I've branded Technology Shamanism. It's like totally tongue in cheek, and it makes me sound like a real douche when I say it. But like, I I try to grab people's attention with this stuff because I feel like, I want people to think about this sort of stuff. So I'm gonna share my screen. If you guys like have something, you just stop me, or if at the end you want to ask some questions, I'm happy to bat stuff around, and if I can help you guys in any way, that would be awesome. So, like I said, I'm branding this, Tom Roberto Tech Shamanism, and my whole thing is like, well, what's shamanism, right? Like, how does that apply to technology? And basically, today the world is really sophisticated with technology, right? And like everything revolves around something online or your phone or tablet or kind of connecting with one another, right? And this stuff is super complicated, and a lot of people just look at it like magic. And that got me thinking about like early tribes where people didn't know anything about medicine or economy or agriculture, and they also thought stuff like that was magic, right? At that point, science and medical was science, and the guy who could somewhat foretell the future or figure out how to use that stuff, that was usually the shaman in the tribe, and people would follow him and come to him for advice or help, and he could kind of bend the rules and seem like a magician in a sort of way. And that's kind of how I think of technology today, that if you have somebody that understands tech but is not in love with tech, and they can teach you how to use it to either benefit someone or make money or benefit a company, then that person kind of holds that role, right? But you have to do it in the right way. So I like to always tie back to the human condition, right? So like who we all are, and how this stuff impacts us. So like each of us has emotions and aspirations and values, and we perceive the world around us in a specific way, right? But that is impacted by other things in our lives that are really important. Business is one of them, right? What you do for a living, how you generate your own wealth, what your purpose is to society, who you perform commerce with, either in buying products or selling products, and innovating in what you do really drives a lot of who you are too, right? And like if you associate with Apple, then people think certain things about you versus having Android, or if you drive a Tesla versus driving a Chrysler, like people assume things about you. So that does impute a little bit on the human condition, right? The same thing applies to technology. Everybody has, some sort of connectivity with either Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, like that all plays into who we are, and it affects us. It's also a status thing, right? If you have a brand new MacBook Pro, people assume something about you versus rolling around with a 10-year-old HP, right? Or a $100 Chromebook. That kind of stuff really plays a part, as well as information and tooling. Like I think a lot of people look past that today, but it's almost like having medical insurance if you know how to use technology and you know how to make this stuff work for you. Because people that are, if you have jobs now and you're using technology, you know that the guru with Excel will usually make more money because they can do things for the business, or someone who understands Salesforce or something like that. Like they'll usually get a better kind of grasp on their career because they know how to use this stuff. So it's becoming that if you don't know it, it kind of affects you as well. So the sword cuts both ways. But again, like who you are, technology and work kind of all play together, in addition to other things, but like that's what makes us us. So I heard a quote in the movie, the Freddie Mercury movie about Queen. He says, the human condition requires a bit of anesthesia. Everybody's looking to make their life easier, right? And if they can click a button and something happens, they're going to go that route than trying to make their life harder. Or if something makes them feel better, they're going to want to use that versus something that makes their life harder and makes them feel worthless. So technology can also do that for us, right? Technology is sort of like a calamine lotion for the itch that we have sometimes. So I like to point out that, like, technology can be the spice of life, but it can also be a drug, right? And the difference between taking a pain pill when you're in pain or taking a pain pill to get rid of how you feel, is the difference of something being helpful or dangerous, or how potent it is, or what you're using it for, and is it addictive, right? It's no coincidence that in the movies Dune and Star Wars that they use the word spice to describe drugs. So it's kind of like the same thing, right? And I try to tie that back with the whole shamanism thing, because if someone came up to you in a tribe and said, oh, you have a headache? Here, eat this and suck on this tree bark, you would say, this guy's nuts. I'm not going to do that. That's not going to work, right? In the same respect, if you found out that there was chemicals in that tree bark that are also in Advil, you would understand that that person has figured out that that actually does reduce your headache and gets rid of the pain, but they may not know that, right? They may just know that this tree bark works and they're using it when it's proper, whereas you find other people that are, doing heroin to get rid of their headaches and then don't realize that they're destroying their lives, or becomes very addictive to the tribe. So again, it cuts both ways. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. And in this little presentation is that technology can be used as a spice to enhance something, but it can also become a drug. And I think you guys as marketing people and business people have the ability and the responsibility to use it in the correct ways so that you're not attributing to the bad stuff and trying to be more about the good stuff, right? Shifting focus, where does that come from? How does before we had technology look to where we are today, where we have technology, right? So I like to look at kind of 3 periods of time. You had everything before the internet. So the internet really became popular in the mid 90s. So everything before the internet is kind of one area. Then you had this early internet phase. This is where I grew up. And it was mid 90s to early 2000s where there was a use of the internet, but it was more fun and it wasn't really serious. And then you had everything kind of past 2008 where now it's super serious, right? And if you look at how businesses and culture was at that time, everything before the internet, businesses were very much focused on independence. They wanted to rely on their own steam. They were very prudent. They didn't want to spend budgets that would hurt the business. There was a need for conformity, especially in the 50s and 60s, where if one business had something, they would all have something. And if one business had a copy machine, then all businesses should have a copy machine because that's what made them more efficient. And it was very much they did well with it. Let's do that ourselves. A much more prudent, independent kind of culture, right? Then the early internet came around and it was fun. And if you knew how to use it and you could kind of bend the rules and things, everything shifted to originality, right? If you look at 90s culture, everything was loud and colorful and everything was about using it to be spontaneous. We're not thinking, should we do this? We're thinking, can we do this? Can I put a website up and sell things, right? That's where eBay came from. Can I put a website up and sell college books? That's where Amazon came from. All of this stuff was more, can I do it, right? And it was about exploration, but that didn't last very long. And today, businesses are very interdependent, right? Think about the internet. If your internet carrier goes down, you could inadvertently take out email and websites and banking and all of this stuff. So it's very much reliant on other systems. And those businesses don't really think about it. So everybody's pushing to the cloud. The cloud just means somebody else is responsible for servers. And now it's okay, but do you trust that company? And if they were to go away tomorrow and a bomb goes off, what happens to you and your business and your data? So that stuff is very interconnected. That has generated more of an indifference in business. We're the hell with it. Everybody's doing it. We'll do it. It's okay. I'm not thinking about it. I know that it works and it's cheap. But what you find is a lot of those businesses now are reusing things. And you'll see that even in entertainment, everything's about a reboot, right? Bring back movies from the 90s and 80s, bring back culture from the 90s and 80s, and take all this stuff, regurgitate it and resell it and repackage it, because all of that originality is now going to an interdependence, right? Nobody's being creative anymore. They're kind of just going the hell with it. But there is no independence. So it's well, if we can just regurgitate it and make money, why not? So kind of interesting the way things have shifted in a very small period of time, like 20 years, the world pivoted. So again, there's good and there's bad, right? So like when we look at technology, having computers and algorithms and all of this cool stuff gets you to this hive mind capability, right? What we do on Wikipedia and Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff is amazing. We as a people are way more educated today than we ever were. And it's because we're all using our ability to think and feeding it into one machine that we can all have access into. The fact that you can Google anything and get that information immediately is incredible, right? The flip side, the bad side to that is there's less thinkers. People Google it and say, I'm just going to trust what Google says. And they really don't think on their own or try to do it. Or like, if I can watch it on YouTube, I'll do it, where that reuse comes from, right? Well, I saw somebody do it on YouTube, and then I saw somebody do it on TikTok, and then I saw somebody do it on Facebook, and like, that's what I'm going to do. But nobody's thinking like, could I come up with a better way? Big data is another thing, right? Putting all of that data there makes us so much smarter. The fact that we can come up with vaccines and we can come up with ways of driving business decisions and stuff with all of this mass data that we have access to is incredible. And it's something that really changes us. But on the back end of that, there's so much more tracking, right? Everything you do is there. Your car reports back through the internet now. Police, cameras, you have smart home devices all throughout your house that have microphones and lenses pointed at you at every single moment. And you really don't know where that data is going and how it's being used, right? A lot of people say like, my phone's listening to me. It definitely is. But like, how does that get used, right? Like there's a good purpose and a bad purpose. And then mobility, right? Thinking of your smartphone or a laptop, like the fact that we got through COVID and people could work from home and like the world still turned is absolutely incredible. That is monumental. We would have been dead as a society in the 50s. Today, we weathered through it. The problem is you have a connectivity addiction now. Kids can't let go of their tablets. You can't let go of your phone, and everybody's focused on what's happening online, and they're focused less about what's happening in real life, right? So I have kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing that I kind of found and then regurgitated, where the reality in 1955 was your parents would tell you, don't talk to strangers, drive careful, it's dad's car, we all have to share it, right? And then in the 90s, we said, don't talk to strangers on the internet. These people are bad. You don't know what they're going to do to you. And don't get into a stranger's car. For God's sakes, we'll get you one, right? Everybody will have a car. Now in 2022, we literally summon strangers from the internet with the sole purpose of getting in their car, being Lyft and Uber, right? So like to think of how the world changed in such a short period of time, somebody from the 50s or 60s would say like, you guys are nuts. Like you get into someone's car and they drive you somewhere, like, why are you not all dead? So like, it is kind of amazing. So like, again, I'm trying to draw from different periods of time and get you thinking about the world before the internet, because ultimately it's still there. We've just put a lot on top of that. And I think that you guys as marketers and thinkers of the future have the ability to really impact that. And I think like MBA students that are coming out, you guys are the thinkers of the future, right? So you really have to harness this for good and drive businesses into where they should be and not where they are today. So what do I mean by that, right? Like marketing becomes life. The reality was, the story that I like to tell here is in 1965, IBM came out with the computer, right? And they came out with a chip that was so powerful that it almost looked like the machine was working on more than one thing at the same time. So they had no way of describing this to people. So the marketing people came up with a word called multitasking, and they marketed the IBM system in 1970 as a multitasking environment, right? Now that kind of became pervasive in conversation, and through the 80s, especially, but into the 90s, multitasking is something that people talk about all the time, right? And they're forcing everybody at work to be multitaskers. And they're saying that when you're at home, you can be a multitasker and you can work from home and do all these things, right? For those of you that don't understand how a computer works, a computer can only process one thing at a time, and it has to go through that cycle very quickly, right? So it actually is single-threaded. So because a computer moves so fast, it looks like it's doing multiple things at the same time, when in reality, it's really just doing one thing at a time very, very fast, right? It almost looks like a sleight of hand or magic, but it's not. Now, computers have only needed to evolve over the last 40 or 50 years, right? But we as humans have been around on the earth for millions of years, right? So when you think about how does the computer evolving impact us as people, right? Because the computer has actually been able to overcome this. And there's something called a multi-threaded processor and multi-core processor that can do multiple things at the same time. So the computers are actually getting to be true multitasking things, right? But us as people, our brains are stuck in time. And we can't evolve out of that, right? Until we become like maybe cyborgs with computers in our heads or something. Like your brain can only process one thing at a time. And we work very much the same way as those original processors, in which we can do multiple things really fast, but our brain has to switch between them, right? So yeah, you can breathe and you can blink and you can work, but that doesn't actually mimic a computer, right? So we as people are not multitaskers. So when you look at the demands of 2020, right? Work is saying, well, you got to do multiple things and you have to work multiple projects and multiple emails and multiple responses. And we compound these issues by adding, Facebook, Twitter. If you guys are working in businesses, like you use Teams and chat and email and all this stuff, right? So the demands on us with Slack and all this stuff is that human OS, what runs inside of us, isn't capable of keeping up, right? The computers can do it, but we can't. And then we have this addiction to instant response. And I love this because this is where I'm hoping you guys either fix or don't do ever. We have managers out there that are addicting all of our employees to instant response. So when they send an email, they expect you to email them right back. Or when they send you an instant message, they want it right back. And then we do that in our personal lives too with text messaging. And we say, I texted you, how come you didn't get back to me? And it's like, it's been 5 minutes, like chill out, right? So we have this addiction with that dopamine response to all the instant response. And then we have this digital prowess piece where the noise floor has risen so high. And we've got so much going on around us with constant news cycles and Twitter and something being able to travel around the world in 3 seconds, TikToks that show everything in like 30-second bites, right? And between the noise floor rising, our addiction to the instant response, and the workload demands, we're overloaded as humans, right? So what does that mean? Do we continue to try to be the computers that are driving us and let them lead the way? Or do we take control back, right? And I'm going to point something out in here that I think is really important. But, I like to show people this because like this is the result of what happens when you think you can multitask, right? And you've got the kids screaming in the background and you were answering an email while you were texting your friend about the meeting you were going to have and cooking dinner, right? And you're like, I can totally multitask, dude. That's not good. We don't want to eat that. And like, this is what happens to your life when you think you can multitask. Like the reality is you're not a multitasker. No one is. So like, stop telling people to multitask. Like, stop expecting that. I think the reality is we've got a problem as a society, and it's that we have a lot of people in super stressful, unpredictable jobs that are being demanded to do things. And we're giving all of the easy, predictable jobs to the computers, and we're watching the computers succeed, and we're watching us fail, and we're just miserable. Tech is beating us at our own game. The one thing I'll say is, it's amazing to me that the most successful organizations today, if I were to ask any one of you, like, give me a super successful business, it's probably a tech business. Somebody would say Apple, Tesla, SpaceX, Microsoft, Google, like they're all tech companies, right? I'll give you a secret in working in the tech business, and hopefully maybe some of you have seen this or are working for tech companies. The secret to tech companies and why they're so successful is they force their employees to work on one thing at a time. So if you've ever seen halls of programmers, they all have those massive Beats headphones on, and they're doing one thing at a time, typing on their code, and they use something called Kanban, which is like basically a modern version of Post-it notes. and they just work on one thing at a clip and then move it through the process, and they don't multitask. And like these businesses are all winning, right? Meanwhile, all the businesses in retail, which are still mimicking like 80s mentalities, are like, let's multitask, let's do 10,000 projects at the same time. And why is Amazon beating us? And it's like, Amazon's beating you because they're not multitasking. Like, that's why. They are hiring a ton of people, and they're just saying, do one thing really well. And those people are so much more successful. So I'm self-branding something that I'm called hypertasking, right? And this is what I'm talking to people about. And I'm like, you guys should definitely talk to your employees about hypertasking. You know what hypertasking is? Monotasking. It's not multitasking, but it sounds much cooler than monotasking, right? So like, I think as you guys are talking to employees and thinking about things, you know, it's really in the marketing of how you say it, right? When you tell somebody you're going to monotask, they go, that means slow. That means you're not a multitasker. But if you're like, hey, listen, I'm hypertasking this thing. I'm hypertasking the shit out of it. People will be like, what the hell is hypertasking? Like, that sounds much faster than multitasking. And you could be like, it's amazing. Like, I do one thing and then I do another thing. And then I go back to the first thing after I'm done with the next three things. And they go like, that's amazing. What do you call that? And you guys should definitely look up Kanban, which is like a management style. There's also something called Sprint and Scrum that programmers use. And Sprint and Scrum is basically just do one thing and then go back and check the one thing and then go to the next thing and then go back and check on that. And like, you're like, yeah, that's just monotasking, man. Like, so I think this is all about, you know, marketing, how you talk to people. So I'm going to give you three sort of boring tech things that I think are interesting, because this is where computers and computer companies are beating us at our own game. So like, disruptive traits tend to equal efficiency. If you think of the most successful people you know, it's probably a lot of different traits, but one of them is probably being disruptive. Either they don't follow rules, they ignore certain things, they break rules, they bend rules. And again, like, where we as humans can do that, we can break rules and bend rules, computers can't. They have to follow rules. They don't think. Computers are not alive, right? So if we steal what the computers are doing and use it in our own lives, it's actually super interesting to see that we could be better than the computers by stealing some of the same things. So one of them is called interrupt coalescing. It's basically the idea of procrastinating in favor of getting it done. So like, computers' battery life has gotten significantly better over the last couple of years. But when you look at what's changed about batteries and computers, nothing has. It's the same technology that's existed for over a decade. So why is the battery getting better, right? There's something called interrupt coalescing where programmers have figured out, if I could tell the computer to just wait on something until the last possible minute before it affects the user, we can actually gain more power efficiency because the computer's not doing anything. It can sleep. So what your computer does is, if you're not like actually working on something and you walk away, it shuts down the Wi-Fi, it stops checking email, it doesn't refresh the browser, it goes into sort of like a hibernation. And then you come back and all of a sudden the screen, and before you even notice it, it looks like it did everything in the background, when in reality, it just waited until you move the mouse to do it, because it's got that much power now. But it saved all this battery life. So the same thing with your phone. When you throw it in your pocket, it doesn't actually check everything. It'll send you notifications and it'll do that stuff, but it doesn't actually like pull the email. That's why when you open the mail app, sometimes you see it like populate real fast. It's because the phone was waiting to the last minute to do it. That can be done in your real life. If you're thinking about email, right, alone, I have a guy, I literally am going to throw out a window at work because he says I should always be in front of my inbox. And if I don't respond, he's like, you know, going to lose his mind. The idea is I wait for moments in the day to check my email, and I do it, you know, maybe on a 60-minute cycle. And I'm getting 10 times more work done than he is, and he doesn't understand why. And it's like, because I have 60 minutes of uninterrupted time to do something, and I can do it well and think about it. And then I answer my email an hour later, and you know who doesn't notice? 90% of people. They say, Tom's really smart and responsive. We're stealing this idea of interrupt coalescing. The second one is ranking. So there's a system called Linux. It runs on Android phones and a lot of other server systems and things. And there was an issue in 2003 where they found the system was very sluggish in how it was able to get things done, because every operating system creates a list of things that the computer has to do, right? And then it would rank them based off importance and say, this one's really important, we have to do it first, then this one, then this one, then this one. And they found that after a computer had so many things going on, that the computer spent more time ranking the list than just getting the list done. So what they did was they said, the hell with the ranking system. What we're going to do is we're going to list all the things, and then at random, we're going to start picking things off that list and doing them. And what happened was the computer became far more efficient because it spent more time doing the things than trying to rank the things. So again, if you were to steal this in your own life, like, people say, again, back to the example of email, right? Like, how do you answer your emails? Do you sort them? Do you put them in folders? Do you put little flags on them? Do you use Gmail to put all the little text on there and then you search them and you can create algorithms on it? And it's like, no, fuck all that. Like, I can just take that stuff and just start answering emails. And if you did it at random, you'd find that you're 10 times more efficient than actually trying to rank the stuff, right? So again, this is an idea of stealing it from the computer business, and we as people can bend the rules and do all this stuff, and we could be a lot more efficient. I like to kind of end it with, simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication. This is where Apple succeeds, right? Apple sells you something, and if you know Android versus Apple, you'll know that Android does way more things and gives you way more control than iOS. iOS outsells Android every day of the week because people like simple things. They don't want the complexity, right? Some people are looking for that, but most people aren't. So if you can try to create something that's simple, you'll understand it, and it seems very sophisticated. The other thing is, done is better than perfect. Nothing in the world is perfect. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. And if you're going for perfection, that is a different goal than being productive, right? And if you're trying to be productive, all you got to do is get the things done. You're better off getting what you can get done, and not focus so much on being perfect or having the best system or the best workflow. The next thing I kind of talk about is something, again, like I make up all these names because I think I'm so clever. Bodacious Antiquities, right? What in the hell does that mean? I'm basically selling you the future lays in our past, right? Again, back to what I said in the beginning of this presentation, the idea here is people understand the world before technology, and people don't understand technology very well. So people understand problems, right? So if you think of an appliance, a fridge, it keeps things cold, right? And maybe it gives you water. Or an oven, it cooks things, it gets hot. Or a printer, it prints out something on a piece of paper. People understand that stuff and they latch onto it. So like an iPod plays music, DoorDash brings me food, PlayStation plays games. These are things that are wildly successful today, right? Now, some of them are technology, an iPod, right? But an iPod only played music. And, DoorDash doesn't deliver everything, it delivers food. Services fix a problem, and gadgets can make this stuff more fun. But again, people understand what an item, if it does one thing or two things, they understand that a lot better than it does everything. What people don't understand is platforms. What the hell is Facebook, right? Like, I hate Facebook and Twitter. What actually are they, right? You could say, well, they connect people. Yeah, but they're a lot of marketing and video, and now they're trying to be TikTok. And it's like, nobody really understands what Facebook is, because Facebook is not really solving a problem. Facebook is a hammer looking for a nail, right? Same thing is like, what is the cloud? Where is the cloud? How do I get to the cloud? Where does the cloud really live, right? And like, people don't understand this stuff. Now, I'm not saying the cloud is bad. I'm just saying it's very hard to sell and market the cloud because nobody gets it. And like, forget about the whole crypto NFT thing. Like, I'm sure some of you are rich with this, and like, God bless you, but like, none of that's real. Money's not real. I understand. Nobody cares about crypto. Like, features kill simplicity. The devil's in the details, and like, free isn't a business model. So I think, as you look at what you're going to do with your lives going forward, I think you should really be focused on, can I come up with something that solves one problem and then market the shit out of it? Don't try to make a platform, because platforms pivot and they change all the time. You guys can still see this, right? Things that lead to tectonic shifts, like when you look at this, you have the Sony Walkman, that did one thing, it played music on cassette. You had the Nintendo, it played video games, it didn't connect to the internet, right? All right, yeah, phones and computers, they did connect to the internet eventually, but like, the cell phone made calls, the BlackBerry had messages, the Palm Pilot used to keep your calendar, and the computer used to be a word processor that could also play games. That kind of stuff people understood, and they created tectonic shifts in the world. It pivoted on its axis when these things were invented. The things that are leading to our demise right now, where you're probably looking at working, is like Facebook and Twitter, right? They've ruined us. They've allowed our politics to be consumed by technology. They've allowed us to hate our family and friends because of all the things they post, and like, commenting on our neighbors because they put something on their lawn. The Internet of Things, like putting all these smart things in your house, they're awesome. I have a lot of them, but like the fact that you're throwing it in there and you're like, yeah, the thing costs $30 and I don't have to pay for it. And you're like, you know how you're paying for it? Your privacy. That's how you're paying for it, right? Robomail, robocalls, bots on an AI that text message you and deal with it. It's like, oh, my customer service uses AI and it can talk to you and solve your problems. I would challenge every one of you to tell me that you had an awesome experience with an AI call bot when you called up for support. You were probably like, zero, operator, get me a human being, right? None of that works. And then the app store, right? Like all these apps, and you go like, well, some of the apps are very useful, absolutely. But a lot of the apps are time wasters, and they're tracking you, and there's like all this stuff, and it's very negative, right? So like if I were to gear you guys to how you should drive marketing efforts, it's focus on stuff like this and not stuff like this, because this stuff is losers. And it's really not good for the business or for society. So how do we market that stuff, right? What do we look for? I've broken this down into kind of 3 ways. I'm not a marketing genius by any means, but like I've worked with very smart marketing guys. Actually, one of the CEOs I worked with ran the Exxon Mobil contract where, the Tiger on the Run stores that used to be in Exxon. He designed that store and everything. One of the owners of my last business was the guy who invented Got Milk. So like I've had some FaceTime with these guys. They're super smart, and it's amazing what they'll tell you. New works, right? So like selling something that's new is really easy. It creates an itch, and your product will slide in there as sort of a salve, right? So like the Amazon box, there's no coincidence that it's got a smile on it, right? Amazon knows damn well that you want to see that box on your front door every day because it means something new just arrived. So it's selling new, right? That's a super slick marketing message. Apple knows that you want the newest product with the better camera and the more storage and the slicker back that's got Gorilla Glass that you're still going to wrap a $30 case that you bought off Amazon on, right? And then it makes your phone look awful. Or just the fact that that product does something that your current product doesn't, and it's very easy to sell new. So new is a great way to latch on to gimmicks, but it's not a long-term strategy unless your business is always coming out with new iterations, in which case you should focus on the newest features about it and make it personal, right? Again, Amazon having that smile on the box, subconsciously, you're waiting for that little smile when you get home from work, because maybe that's the only good part of your day. This one to me is magical. Nostalgia is very delicate, but it's far more potent, right? If you guys have seen Mad Men, there was like a whole episode on this, but in essence, if you can have a product connect back to a simpler time and connect with a person on a personal level that reminds them, kind of like a time machine, when they were kids, going home where they felt safe, having parents around them, and they knew that they were loved, that kind of connection will drive them back to a brand that they will fight for. And the companies that have done this are super smart. If you look at Apple, Apple doesn't sell you computers, they sell you experiences. And it's usually of your kids doing something fun that you could record, or when you first got online and how to build a website, or how you can use your computer to listen to music with friends at a party, right? They sell you moments, and they're like a spaceship, but it's more like they're taking you from place to place, or like a time machine that goes backward, and that you can really connect to another time. Same thing goes for Nintendo. How many times have you seen them? Why is it that Nintendo used to be a box with consoles and now it's handheld? Because it reminds all of us in the 80s that had it, sitting on the couch or in the car with your mom and dad, hoping to catch a glimpse of the streetlight so that you can continue to play Tetris. They know that, and they're trying to recreate that moment for not only us, but for our children, so that we can tell them about it and then they want it. So like clicking with nostalgia and reminding somebody of something is really, really powerful. The last one is magic. So I did a huge project for Macy's in Herald Square. It's an amazing store. It's got amazing history. Magic really works, right? People want to be in awe. They want to feel like a kid. And people absolutely love discovery and surprise. It creates a unique perspective and people want to believe in it, right? It's the same reason why people go to Disney World and want to feel like a kid and ride the rides and believe in the characters and take pictures with Mickey, because they want to feel that magic and they want to be reminded of something that maybe doesn't exist in the real world, right? So Macy's has this whole idea of magic in their stores and they want to elate and surprise you. Same thing with like Pixar, right? Pixar creates movies. Think of Andy and Buzz, right? What does that remind you of? It reminds you of being a kid and playing with toys. It's a magical thing and you always wanted your toys to come to life, and what would they be like, right? Coca-Cola in 2021 revealed that they're actually going to have a whole platform called Real Magic, where they celebrate things and people one Coke at a time, and they have your name on the can, and they're trying to connect with you and make it where it's like, holy crap, there's a Coca-Cola can with my name Tom on it, and like that's really cool that it was right there, and I'm going to grab it and drink that because it's my name, and it feels magical, right? So like that mentality around magic is not childish. A lot of brands look for that because the smart marketers go, that's really slick. I like that you're thinking like that, right? You also have to understand the business you're with. So, you know, Amazon sells stuff. They want to get you the stuff and they want to get it there as fast as humanly possible. So that connects with users, right? That affects their emotions and it connects with them on that tech piece. But Apple sells moments, right? So which one is more powerful? Which one sells more? And who are you willing to fight for? I don't think a lot of people would fight for Amazon as a company. I think they even in some cases feel that they're bad. But universally, everybody's like, Apple's awesome. And you're like, why? Because they connect with you on a personal level and they sell magic and moments and nostalgia. But if you understand your business model, you know, you can be very powerful too as a marketer, right? So like McDonald's is not a hamburger company. McDonald's is a real estate company. If you haven't seen the documentary about Ray Kroc or that movie about McDonald's, you should watch it. It's really awesome. McDonald's tried to license the idea out in the I believe it was the 70s, and what they found was trying to run a burger company was basically making them poor, and McDonald's as a corporation was basically not making any money, but there was a ton of stores. So a smart businessman came in and said, well, you're not really in the business of burgers, you're in the business of buildings. So why don't you just own the land that the McDonald's is on and franchise it out and let the owner sell the burgers and you guys sell them the land and make them sign a 30-year lease on every building. Overnight, McDonald's became a multi-billion-dollar business because they literally own the land underneath every McDonald's and they license it back to people. Same thing goes for Tesla. Tesla, people think it's a car company. Tesla's not a car company. Tesla's a data company. Every Tesla has like 16 cameras on the car with telemetry and an internet connection, and it's feeding all of that data back to a database that they maintain because they're trying to map every single road and every stop sign and light bulb and street light in the world. And they're doing that by allowing their cars to drive roaming and, around. Tesla really doesn't ever think, Elon Musk has said this in public, that they will ever get to a self-driving car, but they believe that some company will design that. And when they do, they're going to have to use Tesla's database on all the road information. So like they're super smart and they're selling the cars and probably losing money, but they're gaining data where every other company is standing still. So understanding the business model and then being able to tie that back to marketing and stuff is really important. So what would I recommend to you guys, right? Like as a tech guy, as the tech shaman, I would say, if you're you should embrace new technology. You should absolutely use it. You should see how it works. You should investigate how things do it, but you should use it in a simple way and use it sparingly. If you can't understand how it works, it probably means somebody is tricking you into doing something else, right? People buy Teslas not realizing that they themselves are feeding a ton of information back to Tesla. They think they're buying a car. That's because they don't know how that car works, because the car doesn't even have a dashboard. It has a iPad on it, right? So like, use the tech simply and sparingly and try to understand how it works. And I think, you'll be in a better spot. Focus on user experience by focusing on the human experience. How does it impact you as a person? And then build back from that Don't try to design something to trick someone, because if you're tricking them, it means you're taking advantage of them, right? Try to connect with them on a human level. Deliver unexpected magic, right? So be the tech company, hypertask the hell out of it, reduce the noise around you, be more efficient, and people will think you're magic. They'll think that they're dealing with, person co instead of just one person. And try to reach back into a simpler time, right? Like think that tech companies are probably not doing something good, and don't trust the tech company or trust the tech. Reach back into your minds and remember what the world was like before that tech, and then try to augment that with something that's, good, but not totally reliant on tech, and balance that life with tech, right? Like tech is not alive. It doesn't care about you. And I can promise you the tech companies that are building it also don't care about you. And I kind of wrap it up with, you are who you associate with. Try to be a good person. Try to associate with super smart people. Don't tolerate B-level players, and don't tolerate somebody that's trying to trick people. Technology is a tool, but not the answer. Don't be hammers looking for nails. Understand a problem and then solve the problem. Don't try to create a solution and sell it to somebody that doesn't have that problem. Understanding the world before the internet, you realize that what we really crave as people is not technology, and it's what technology isn't giving us. The reason we're still obsessed with Facebook and Twitter is we want connection with each other, and we're so desperate for that, we're willing to throw every personal moment of our life on a website in hopes that somebody says, you look like you're having fun. How are you doing? The reality is you just need a conversation with somebody. You could start that at a bar without any technology. That's kind of all I have. You can be a tech shaman too, hopefully now. If you guys have any questions or you want to say I'm an idiot, that's cool too. Whatever you think.
Thank you so much, Tom. Please, students, feel free to ask Tom a question or two about any of the topics that he covered.
Hi. I just have a not more of a comment than a question, but I work more in like the service industry, and but it was interesting that a lot of what you said, even though it was more product kind of geared, is definitely really, it's just, selling a service.
So I'll actually tell you a story. So the company I work for now is a service company. So the company I'm with now is called Coalescing. We dispatch technicians to go install tech. Like that's what I don't sell hardware. I don't sell software. I don't sell any physical thing. I sell people, bodies going out and doing something. So when I came on, they didn't have a marketing group. I run their tech, but like I also do a lot of marketing and stuff. And the way that I pitch the service is I call it service as a product. So I don't know if you've seen like, software as a service or platform as a service. And like everybody wants to sell a service. As a service company, you want to sell like a product because people understand products and they don't understand services, right? So like we often pick out those moments. And when I'm in sales pitches and stuff, I land a lot of business with our sales teams, and the sales team will come out and sell those moments that the service can produce. So like, we'll say like, what, do you guys do access point installation and, yada, yada, yada. And they'll go like, oh yeah, actually we have a really big project that we're doing that nationwide. And we're like, cool. Well, let me tell you a story about what we've done with access point installs, and we'll run them through the project. And then they'll go, wow, that sounds great. That's not how our project went. And we're like, well, that's what we can do for you. And I kind of pitch it to them as a product. And we actually have slicks that call us a service as a product. And I flat rate the service to not be hourly. So like in our, and I'm not sure about your business, I see the physical therapy shirt, so I'm assuming maybe that, but like we actually come up with flat rates for people because they're 10 times more likely to give us the business when I say it's $225 for 3 hours, because we think it's always going to be 3 hours. And they're like, yeah, that makes sense. It probably is always 3 hours. We're cool with that. Whereas if I come back and say it's 180 for 2 hours and then 75 for the additional hour, they go, but then I'm taking the risk on 4 and 5 hours. And you go like, right, but if I just said 3, it would be the same math. And they're like, nah, 3 sounds better. Give me the 3 and you guys take the risk. And it's like one of those things where like, just understanding what their problem was and like interpreting that is really interesting. So like, I'm super interested in services, because I feel like one of the things I said in one of other Chrissy's presentation, classes, we were talking about how as marketers, everybody's competing with Amazon, right? So like, all these stores, let's pick Macy's, right? Like they can't figure out how to get out of their own way. And they're like, well, we can't beat Amazon because they deliver right to your house. And it's like, but where is your people talking to companies like Uber or Lyft or DoorDash and saying, why can't you guys run to our warehouse, pick up a device and drop it off like for us? Because then we could sell coffee makers like that, or, you know, things that we could put in people's cars. And that's another area where like the services businesses are waiting for that, but they don't know to ask for that, right? Like their Uber's focused on like, let me get a person from A to B, and DoorDash is focused on food. But if somebody came to them with an awesome opportunity like that, I'm sure they'd take it. I think it's just a matter of those businesses thinking like that and focusing more on the services aspect of things. Because again, people don't understand services. It's one of those things like, how does the screen get on the wall? I don't know. I figure I buy it and it goes on the wall. And you're like, no, somebody gets paid to put it up there. You know, same thing, I'm sure, with your business, like, you know, having people that can do rehabilitation and stuff like that. Like, you know, that business is not often thought about until you need it. And then all of a sudden it becomes very evident to you that like you need that in your life. So how are you selling that? I think if more of you were looking for jobs, I would focus on businesses that had that mentality or need. Like I think businesses that have a problem with selling products because they're competing with Amazon, that's a service problem. You know, same thing as businesses focused on how to be faster than their competition. It's usually associated with workflow, which is a kind of a service too, like, you know, understanding how their business works and what it produces. You know, you get so many employees that are like, well, that's just how we've always done it. And that's like death to a company when you say that.
Oh yeah, thank you. That was such a great talk. I'm so inspired. Okay, so look, if say you create something and it gets people addicted, would that be kind of bad? Because then it would be less spice and more like of a drug.
Yeah,
I don't
right.
think I would create anything not good, but I'm just saying, like, is that the indication?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I don't think people like realize it, right? Like I don't think that the apps that like become very addictive, like TikTok, right? Like I don't think the person that invented that probably thought that it would become addictive. I think it takes on something, right? Where I think the problem becomes, and it is a marketing problem, I think. The company doesn't try to sell the good in it, right? So like TikTok doesn't come and try to sell like if I was the marketing guy for TikTok, I would have commercials and things that show friends together having fun in a backyard party, all dancing with their phone propped up, and like that moment, right? Because that's what TikTok's fun. That's what makes TikTok fun, right? Like that moment. I think they quietly kind of like go like, you know, like it's so much fun to use, and you're like, yeah, but you're just selling people staying on the app, right? And I know that's good for advertising, but it's not good for like your users. So I think like the marketing groups really need to come back and say like, what's the brand recognition that we want to be associated with? And if you're really like, if you're an MBA grad in marketing, like I think it would be super intelligent to walk in the room and say, what is the business trying to sell more of? And like, yes, I know we're trying to attract advertisers because TikTok is free, but do advertisers want to be associated with a brand that has better brand awareness, or do they want to be associated with a brand that kind of has an awful brand awareness but more user time, right? Like what do we want to associate with? And again, like, do I want to be Apple or do I want to be Android? To your point, like, don't market the addicting nature of it. I think companies fall into that and they don't like disassociate because it's almost like we kind of know that's there, but it helps us. So like, we're not going to talk about that piece. Whereas it's like, why don't you encourage good behavior? Like, I think same thing for Facebook, right? And they were trying for a while. If you remember the portal, they were showing the old dad and the kid, and she's like trying to make, you know, food for her new boyfriend. And she's asking her dad for like cooking advice. And that was like, that's a really cool, magical moment. Like if Facebook could be associated with that, was cool. The problem was they started doing that after like everybody's like, Facebook's looking to sell all of your user data. And it was like way too late. But I think like that was smart on somebody's part to come in and be like, we got to change the topic, man. So I think that's really what you should be looking for. And you're right. Like, I think, you know, I don't think companies are out to be bad. I think they benefit off of the bad things and then they don't look to change it. And before you know it, they become kind of an enemy. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, how do I sell against that? Because once you're seen as bad, it's very hard to come back from it. Again, this is where I come back to like, you guys are all the leaders and breeders of the next, you know, regime. So it's like, you guys have that ability and you got to fight for it. And I don't think a lot of people are going to listen and it's going to be hard, but that's what's going to make it great. it's going to be that like there's a shift in what people are talking about. And if they're talking about each other, I think it's so much more powerful than talking about, you know, a new feature or again, like, you know, look at how much fun it is if you stay on the app forever and then you got kids addicted to it. And you're like, you're addicting kids. It's like Joe, all of a sudden you are now the guy who invented the Joe Camel thing, right? Where you're like the guy who invented Joe Camel, nobody wants to be him. But like, I'm sure at the time it was like, this guy's a genius, man. The kids will get addicted and then we're going to sell a ton of cigarettes. And it was like, yeah, it kills people.
Very true, very true. Look
Very
at
true.
this is Thomas. You're like totally concluding this course in such a great way with the not just the strategy, but now the ethics. This is fantastic. But it's true. I mean, everything is related, and I think Tom, you said everything so well as always, but, especially this time around.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful topics that I'm sure everyone here, will think a lot about way past this course.